Hello, welcome back to History with Kate. I hope you are well and ready for a little bit of a longer one than I've done so far. Please remember to like my video and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it would really help me in my attempts to grow this channel. Alrighty, so today I will be talking about Anne Boleyn. Let's jump in. Anne Boleyn was the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, later Earl of Wiltshire and Earl of Ormond, and his wife Elizabeth Howard, who was the oldest daughter of Thomas Howard, then Earl of Surrey and future second Duke of Norfolk, and his wife Elizabeth Tilney. Anne's date of birth is actually unknown, so yeah, I couldn't find it anywhere. Yeah, I tried. As with Anne, it is uncertain when her two siblings were born because it seems like Mary, her sister, was the older one of the two. Mary's children clearly believed their mum was the older sister. Mary's grandson claimed the Ormond title in 1596 on the basis that she was the elder daughter, which Elizabeth I accepted. Their brother George, he was born around 1504. Thomas Boleyn, writing in the 1530s, stated that his children were born before the death of his father, William Boleyn, in 1505. The Boleyn family originally came from Blickling in Norfolk, 15 miles north of Norwich. Anne's relatives included the Howards, one of the prominent families in England, and Anne's ancestors included King Edward I of England, so noble blood. She had very noble blood. Anne's education was typical for women of her class, so she had a good education. In 1513, she was invited to join the schoolroom of Margaret of Austria and her 4 wards. Her academic education was limited to her family genealogy, grammar, history, reading, spelling, and writing. So, good stuff for someone, back then, woman. She also developed domestic skills such as dancing, embroidery, good manners, household management, music, needlework, and singing. Apologies for the person who just started up a machine outside my room. My goodness. Anne learned to play games such as cards, chess, and dice. She was also taught archery, falconry, horseback riding, and hunting. Anne's father continued his diplomatic career, and in Europe his charm won many admirers, including Margaret of Austria, daughter of Maximilian I, Holy Roman Emperor. So during this period, Margaret ruled the Netherlands on her nephew Charles' behalf and was so impressed with Boleyn that she offered his daughter Anne a place in her household. Pretty cool, right? Ordinarily, a girl had to be 12 years old to have such an honor, but Anne may have been younger. It suggested that because Margaret would call her little. Anne made a good impression in the Netherlands, and Margaret reported that she was well-spoken and pleasant for her young age. Anne stayed from spring 1513 until her dad arranged for her to attend Henry VIII's sister Mary's, who was about to get married to Louis XII of France in October 1514. Anne was a maid of honor to Queen Mary and then to Mary's 15-year-old stepdaughter, Queen Claude, with whom she stayed nearly 7 years. In the Queen's household, she completed her studies of French and she developed an interest in art, fashion, illuminated manuscripts, literature, music, poetry, and religious philosophy. Oh my god, that's my cat. Can you hear it? She also acquired knowledge of French culture, dance, etiquette, literature, music, and poetry, and gained experience in flirtation. Oh my god, go away. Flirtation and courtly love. My cat's here. Hi. Anne's education in France proved itself in later years, inspiring many new trends among the ladies and courtiers of England. I apologize for all the noises going on, but I'm just going to keep filming. Anne was recalled to marry her Irish cousin, James Butler, a man several years older than her who was living at the English court. The marriage was intended to settle a dispute over the title and estates of the earldom of Ormond. But the plan ended in failure, perhaps because Sir Thomas hoped for a grander marriage for his daughter. It's possible. There's speculation around it. Whatever the reason, the marriage negotiations came to a complete halt, and James Butler later married Lady Joan Fitzgerald, daughter and heiress of James Fitzgerald, 10th Earl of Desmond and Amy O'Brien. Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's older sister, had been recalled from France in late 1519, and she married William Carey, a minor noble, in February of 1520 at Greenwich with Henry VIII in attendance. Ooh, fancy. Soon after, Mary became the English king's mistress. So Mary, So as the daughter of courtier Thomas Boleyn, by New Year 1522, Anne had gained a position at the royal court as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine. Her public debut at the court event was at the Green Castle pageant in honour of the imperial ambassadors on the 4th of March 1522. Everybody wore gowns of white satin embroidered with gold thread, and Anne quickly established herself as one of the most stylish and accomplished women at the court, and soon a number of young men were competing for her. It was said that Anne was the perfect woman courtier. Her carriage was graceful, and her French clothes were pleasing and stylish. She danced with ease, had a pleasant singing voice, played the lute and several other musical instruments as well. And she spoke French fluently. A remarkable, intelligent, quick-witted young noblewoman that first drew people into conversation with her and then amused and entertained them throughout the day and evening. In short, her energy and vitality made her a center of attention in any social gathering. During this time, Anne was courted by Henry Percy, son of the Earl of Northumberland, and entered into a secret engagement with him. But the romance was broken off when Percy's dad refused to support their engagement. That sucks. Well, it really does suck because of what happens to her later. Apparently, Anne was sent from court to her family's countryside estate, but it is not known exactly for how long. Upon her return to court, she again entered the service of Catherine of Aragon, and Percy was married to a woman he was actually betrothed to a woman since his childhood, so yeah, he had to marry her. Before marrying Henry VIII, Anne had befriended Sir Thomas Wyatt, one of the greatest poets of the Tudor period. In 1526, Henry VIII became interested in Anne Boleyn, but she resisted his attempts to seduce her and refused to become his mistress. She wanted more. She wanted more than just that. She wanted to be queen. But within a year, he proposed to her. So he proposed marriage to her, and she accepted. He was still actually married to Catherine of Aragon at this stage, but he assumed an annulment could be obtained within months. It was a lot more difficult than that, though. There is no evidence to suggest that they had a sexual relationship until very shortly before their marriage, so we don't know. Henry would write Anne love letters, which did suggest that their love affair remained unconsummated for much of their courtship. So yeah, It is probable that Henry had thought of the idea of annulment, not divorce, as commonly assumed, much earlier than this, as he strongly desired a male heir to secure the throne. He wanted a son. Before Henry VII ascended the throne, England was in a civil warfare over rival claims to the crown, and Henry VIII wanted to avoid similar uncertainty over the succession. So there you go. That's why he was so obsessed with having a son. He and Catherine had no living sons. All of Catherine's children, except Mary, died in infancy. So yeah, it said that she did have a couple of pregnancies that were boys, but they passed away. His feelings for Anne and her refusals to become his mistress probably contributed to Henry's decision that no pope had a right to overrule the Bible, because the pope didn't want them to get divorced or annul the marriage. He wanted Anne, and he wanted Catherine gone. Henry's quest for an annulment became known as the King's Great Matter. Anne saw an opportunity in Henry's infatuation and determined that she would yield to his embraces only as his acknowledged queen and not before. So she wanted to be queen. Catherine kind of had to go. She began to take her place at his side in policy and in state, but not yet in his bed. In 1528, sweating sickness broke out with great severity. In London, the mortality rate was great and the court was dispersed, and Anne Boleyn retreated to the Boleyn residence at Hever Castle. So she got the hell out of there. But she became sick. So she was very sick, and Henry VIII, the king, he sent his own doctor to the castle to care for her. She recovered shortly later. Henry was soon absorbed in securing an annulment from Catherine, and he set his hopes upon a direct appeal to the Holy See, acting independently of Wolsey, to who he at first communicated nothing of his plans. He really wanted to marry Anne so much. In 1527, William Knight, the king's secretary, was sent to Pope Clement VII to sue for the annulment of Henry's marriage to Catherine, on the grounds that the dispensing bull of Julius II permitting him to marry his brother's widow Catherine had been obtained under false pretenses. So Catherine was actually Henry's brother's wife first. So Pope Clement was at the time a prisoner of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, as a result of the sack of Rome in May 1527, and William had some difficulty obtaining access to him. In the end, he had to return with a conditional dispensation, which Wolsey insisted was technically insufficient. So Henry then had no choice but to put his great matter into Wolsey's hands, who did all he could to secure a decision in Henry's favour. But Clement had not empowered his deputy to make a decision. He was still Charles V's hostage, and Charles was loyal to his aunt Catherine. Yeah, catching on? So the Pope forbade Henry to contract a new marriage until a decision was reached in Rome, not in England. Convinced that Wolsey's loyalties lay with the Pope, not in England, Anne, as well as Wolsey's many enemies, ensured his dismissal from public office in 1529. Cavendish, Wolsey's Chamberlain, records that the servants who waited on the king and Anne at dinner in 1529 in Grafton heard her say that the dishonour Wolsey had brought upon the realm would have cost any other Englishman his head. I just want to apologise for stumbling on words. I actually suffer from TIAs, so mini strokes, and it affects, like, I have trouble with words sometimes. Anyway, Henry replied, "Why, then I perceive you are not the Cardinal's friend." Henry finally agreed to Wolsey's arrest. Had it not been for his death from illness in 1530, Wolsey might have been executed for treason. Poor bugger. In 1531, 2 years before Henry married Anne, Catherine was banished from court and her rooms were given to Anne, but public support remained with Catherine. One evening in the autumn of 1531, Anne was dining at a manor house on the River Thames and was almost seized by a crowd of angry women. Anne just managed to escape by boat. Oh my god, my cat. Hi, cat. That's her. Oh, when Archbishop of Canterbury William Warham died in 1532, the Boleyn family chaplain Thomas Cranmer was appointed. In 1532, Thomas brought before Parliament a number of acts, including the supplication against the ordinaries and submissive of the clergy, which recognised royal supremacy over the church, thus finalising the break with Rome. So following these acts, Thomas More resigned as Chancellor, leaving Cromwell as Henry's chief minister. Are you guys getting confused? I hope not. I know I trip up on my words, it's not my fault. Anyway, and I don't edit, so that's just my thing. I don't edit. Everything is raw. Even before her marriage, Anne Boleyn was able to grant petitions, receive diplomats, and had an influence over Henry to plead the cause of foreign diplomats. During this period, Anne played an important role in England's international position by solidifying an alliance with France, and she established an excellent rapport with the French ambassador. Cool, huh? Anne and Henry attended a meeting with the French king in winter 1532, at which Henry hoped to enlist the support of Francis III of France for his intended marriage to Anne. Anne's family also profited from this relationship. Her dad was created Earl of Wiltshire. Henry also came to an arrangement with Anne's Irish cousin and created him Earl of Ormond. So he's just like giving Anne's family all these treats. Thanks to Anne's intervention, her widowed sister Mary would receive an annual pension of £100, and Mary's son was given a prestigious education. Even though the French government gave support for Henry's remarriage and Francis I had a private conference with Anne, the French king maintained alliances with the Pope that he could not explicitly defy. So Henry and Anne, they went and they married in a secret ceremony on the 14th of November 1532, and she soon became pregnant. As the first wedding was considered to be unlawful at the time, a second wedding took place in London on the 25th of January 1533. On the 23rd of May 1533, Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon was ruled null and void. And 5 days later, on the 28th of May 1533, Cranmer declared the marriage of Henry and Anne good and valid. There you go. Took a while, but they got there. Catherine was formally stripped of her title as queen, and Anne was consequently crowned queen consort on the 1st of June 1533 in a magnificent ceremony at Westminster Abbey with a banquet afterwards. She was the last queen consort of England to be crowned separately from her husband. Unlike any other queen consort, Anne was crowned with St. Edward's crown, which had previously been used to crown only monarchs. Historian Alice Hunt suggested that this was done because Anne's pregnancy was visible by this stage, and the child was presumed to be male. Yeah, everyone thought it was going to be a boy. Oh dear. On the previous day, Anne had taken part in an elaborate procession through the streets of London, seated in a litter of white cloth of gold that rested on 2 palfreys, while the barons of the Clickports held a canopy of cloth of gold over her head. Try say that 10 times fast. Honestly, guys, when you've got a speech impediment, and yet I do YouTube videos, so I deserve a pat on the back. Anyway, in accordance with tradition, she wore white, and on her head a gold coronet, beneath which her long black hair hung down freely. Meanwhile, the House of Commons had forbidden all appeals to Rome. It was only then that Pope Clement at last took the step to announcing a provisional excommunication of Henry and Cranmer. He condemned the marriage to Anne, and in March 1534 declared the marriage to Catherine legal, and again ordered Henry to return to his wife Catherine. Henry's like, nah, it's not happening, man. It's sad, poor Catherine. Henry now required his subjects to swear an oath attached to the First Succession Act, which effectively rejected papal authority in legal matters and recognized Anne Boleyn as queen. Those who refused, such as Sir Thomas More, who had resigned as Lord Chancellor, and John Fisher, Bishop of Rochester, were placed in the Tower of London. Bet they regretted that. In late 1534, Parliament declared Henry the only supreme head on earth of the Church of England. Yeah. The Church in England was now under Henry's control, not Rome's. Okay. On the 14th of May, 1534, in one of the realm's first official acts protesting Protestant reformers, Anne wrote a letter to Thomas Cromwell seeking his aid in ensuring that English merchant Richard Herman be reinstated, a member of the merchant adventurers in Antwerp, and no longer persecuted simply because he had helped in setting forth of the New Testament in English. Okay. She had a decisive role in influencing the Protestant reformer Matthew Parker to attend court as her chaplain, and before her death entrusted her daughter to Parker's care. There you go. She really trusted him. After her coronation, Anne settled into a quiet routine at the king's favourite residence, which was Greenwich Palace, to prepare for the birth of her baby. So the baby was born slightly premature on the 7th of September 1533, and she was a girl. Yeah. She was christened Elizabeth, probably in honour of either or both Anne's mum Elizabeth Howard and Henry's mum Elizabeth of York. But the birth of a girl was a heavy blow to her parents, who had confidently expected a little boy. Yeah, all but one of the royal physicians and astrologers had predicted a son, and the French king had been asked to stand as his godfather. So yeah, sorry, it's not a boy, it's a little girl. Now, the prepared letters announcing the birth of a prince had a couple of S's added to them. So yeah, instead of it saying prince, it's princess. And the traditional jousting tournament for the birth of an heir was cancelled. Ruthless. The infant princess was given a splendid christening, but Anne feared that Catherine's daughter Mary, now stripped of her title of princess and labelled a bastard, that sucks, posed a threat to Elizabeth's position. So she was worried that Henry was going to do the same to their daughter, because he did it to his other daughter. Henry soothed his wife's fears by separating Mary from her many servants and sending her to Hatfield House, where Elizabeth would live with her own sizable staff of servants, and the country air was thought better for the baby's health. So yeah, Anne frequently visited her daughter and other residences. The new queen had a larger staff of servants than Catherine. There were more than 250 servants to tend to her personal needs, from priests to stable boys, and more than 60 maids of honor who served her and accompanied her to social events. That's a lot of people. My goodness. She also employed several priests who acted as her confessors, chaplains, and religious advisors. The king and his new queen enjoyed a reasonably happy marriage with periods of calm and affection. Anne's sharp intelligence, political views, and forward manner, although desirable in a mistress, were at times unacceptable in a wife, especially the king's wife, a queen. She was once reported to have spoken to her uncle in words that shouldn't be used to a dog. She's lippy. Yeah. So, sad, this part's sad. After a stillbirth or miscarriage as early as Christmas 1534, Henry was discussing with Cranmer and Cromwell the possibility of divorcing Anne. But he didn't want to go back to Catherine either. He wanted to, find someone else. But nothing came of the matter as the royal couple reconciled, and they spent the summer of 1535 together, and by October she was pregnant again. Anne loved to look her best and would spend large amounts of money on gowns, jewels, headdresses, ostrich feather fans, riding equipment, and furniture. Numerous palaces were renovated to suit the extravagant tastes she and Henry shared. Her motto was "the most happy," and she chose a white falcon as her personal device. Sadly, Anne had quite a few enemies in court and was blamed for Henry's tyranny and called by some of her subjects the king's whore. It's not very nice. Public opinion turned further against her after the marriage produced no male heirs. On the 8th of January 1536, news of Catherine of Aragon's death reached Anne and the king, who were apparently overjoyed. That's not very nice. Catherine seemed like a lovely lady. I read about her. I actually did a video on Henry VIII, so I talk about her, so if you want to watch that, I think it's one of the first ones. The following day, Henry wore yellow. It's a symbol of joy and celebration in England, but it's a sign of mourning in Spain. And he wore it head to toe and celebrated Catherine's death with festivities. So they don't know if he was happy that she was dead or... With Catherine dead, Anne attempted to make peace with Mary. But Mary wasn't having it, and she rejected her. Mary is Catherine's daughter. Perhaps because of rumours that were circulating that Catherine had been poisoned by Anne or Henry. She didn't want to, Mary didn't want to be her friend. These began after the discovery during her embalming that Catherine's heart, it was blackened, and the people back then, they don't know much. Modern medical experts are in agreement that this was not the result of poisoning, but from heart cancer, the cause of her death, and an extremely rare condition that was not understood at that time. Queen Anne, pregnant again, was aware of the dangers if she failed to give birth to a little boy. And with Catherine dead, Henry would be free to marry without any issues. At this time, Henry began paying court to one of Anne's maids of honor, who was Jane Seymour, and allegedly gave her a locket which had a little miniature picture of himself in it, so she would wear that. While wearing this locket in the presence of Anne, Jane began opening and closing it, so she was like, "Aw, look at Henry." So Anne flipped her shit and she ripped the locket off Jane's neck with such force that her fingers bled. Later that month, the king, he was thrown from his horse in a tournament and knocked unconscious for 2 hours. That is a long time to be out. So a worrying incident that Anne believed led to her miscarriage 5 days later. So she ended up miscarrying. Another possible cause of the miscarriage was an accident in which, upon entering a room, Anne saw Jane Seymour sitting on her husband Henry's lap, and Anne flew into a rage. So, there's a few things that could have stressed her out. Whatever the cause, on the day that Catherine of Aragon was buried, Anne miscarried a baby, which, according to the imperial ambassador, she had at about 3.5 months, and which seemed to be a boy. Massive blow, right? Massive blow. So this loss was the beginning of the end for this royal marriage. Given Henry's desperate desire for a son, the sequence of Anne's pregnancies has attracted much interest. It is speculated that Anne had 2 stillborn children after Elizabeth's birth and before the male child that she miscarried in 1536. So as Anne was recovering from her miscarriage, Henry declared that he had been seduced into the marriage by means of deception or spells. So he's trying to get out of this marriage. His new favourite was Jane Seymour, and he quickly moved her into the royal quarters at Greenwich, and Jane's brother Edward and his wife moved in with her. So that's what Henry does. He's like, out with the old, in with the new. This was followed by Anne's brother George being refused the prestigious honour of the Order of the Garter. So he's bringing Jane's family in, throwing Anne's family out. Anne's biographer, Eric Ives, believes that her fall and execution were primarily engineered by her former ally, Thomas Cromwell. The guy that she thought was awesome. Anne argued with Cromwell over the redistribution of church revenues and over foreign policy. She advocated that revenues be distributed to charitable and educational institutions, and she favoured a French alliance. Cromwell preferred an imperial alliance. For these reasons, it suggested that Anne Boleyn had become a major threat to Thomas. But he doesn't think so. Thomas doesn't think so. So, on the other hand, it said that no power struggle existed between Anne and Cromwell, and that not a trace can be found of a conspiracy against Anne from Thomas. Thomas became involved in the royal marital drama only when Henry ordered him into the case. So Thomas did not manufacture the accusations of adultery, though he and other officials used them to bolster Henry's case against Anne. So it's all very mixed up. Henry himself issued the crucial instructions. His officials, including Cromwell, carried them out. Yeah, so Henry's the big boss man. The result was, by modern standards, a legal travesty. However, the rules of the time were not bent in order to assure a conviction. There was no need to tamper with rules that guaranteed the desired result, since law at the time was an engine of state, not a mechanism for justice. It's a very different time. Towards the end of April, a Flemish musician in Anne's service called Mark Smeaton was arrested for being Anne's lover. Yeah. So he initially denied it, but apparently he later confessed. Perhaps after being tortured or promised freedom, because they were torturing him. So maybe he was like, I did it, just for them to stop. So another courtier, Sir Henry Norris, was arrested on May Day. Prior to his arrest, Norris was treated kindly by the king, who offered him his own horse to use on the May Day festivities. It seems likely that during the festivities, the king was notified of Smeaton's confession, and it was shortly after the alleged conspirators were arrested upon his orders. So, yeah. Norris denied his guilt and swore that Queen Anne was innocent. And in my opinion, she was. Like, after everything I've read, I think she was innocent. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence against Norris was an overheard conversation with Anne at the end of April, where she accused him of coming often to her chambers, not to pay court to her lady-in-waiting, who was Madge Shelton, but to herself. But remember, it's just hearsay, right? No one really knows if this shit's true. Sir Francis Weston was arrested 2 days later on the same charge, as was Sir William Brereton, a groom of the King's Privy Chamber. Sir Thomas Wyatt, a poet and friend of the Boleyns, who was allegedly infatuated with her, before her marriage to the king, was also imprisoned for the same charge, but he was later released, most likely due to his or his family's friendship relationship with Cromwell. So Sir Richard Page was also accused of having a sexual relationship with Queen Anne, but he was acquitted of all charges after further investigation could not implicate him with Anne. Okay, so the final accused was Queen Anne's own brother, George Boleyn. He was arrested on charges of incest and treason. He was accused of 2 incidents of incest. Yeah, apparently she slept with her brother. On the 2nd of May, 1536, Anne was arrested and she was taken to the Tower of London by barge. It is likely that Anne may have entered through the court gate in the Byward Tower rather than the Traitors' Gate. That's what people say. In the tower, she collapsed to her knees and she demanded to know the location of her dad as well as the charges against her. 4 of the accused men were tried in Westminster on the 12th of May 1536. Weston, Brereton and Norris publicly maintained their innocence, and only Smeaton supported the Crown by pleading guilty. 3 days later, Anne and George Boleyn were tried separately in the Tower of London before a jury of 27 peers. She was accused of adultery, incest and high treason. By the Treason Act of Edward III, adultery on the part of a queen was a form of treason because of the implications of the succession to the throne, for which the penalty was hanging, drawing, and quartering for a man and burning alive for the woman. Wow. The other form of treason alleged against her was that of plotting the king's death with her lovers so that she might later marry Henry Norris. So they're making up all this shit. Henry Percy, 6th Earl of Northumberland, who was also once Anne's fiancé, sat on the jury that unanimously found her guilty. When the verdict was announced, he is said to have collapsed and he had to be carried from the courtroom. Okay. On the 17th of May, Cranmer declared Anne's marriage to Henry null and void. The accused were found guilty and they were condemned to death. What a shitty ass time, right? My goodness. George Boleyn and the other accused men were executed on the 17th of May 1536. William Kingston, the constable of the Tower, reported Anne seemed very happy and ready to be done with life. Yeah, because Henry put her through shit. My god. Henry's a dick. I don't like him one little bit. Anyway, Henry commuted Anne's sentence from burning to beheading, and rather than have a queen beheaded with the common axe, he brought an expert swordsman from France to perform the execution. Oh, thanks, Henry. You're so kind. On the morning of the 19th of May, William Kingston, the constable of the Tower, he wrote, so that's what he wrote: "This morning she sent for me, that I might be with her at such time as she received the good Lord, to the intent I should hear her speak, as touching her innocency away to be clear. And in the writing of this she sent for me. And at my coming she said, Mr. Kingston, I hear I shall not die before noon, and I am very sorry therefore, for I thought to be dead by this time, and past my pain. I told her it should be no pain. It was so little. And then she said, I heard say the executioner was very good, and I have a little neck. I have seen many men and also women executed, and that they have been in great sorrow. And to my knowledge, this lady has much joy in death. Shortly before dawn, she called Kingston to her mass with her, to hear mass with her, so like church, and swore in his presence on the eternal salvation of her soul upon the holy sacraments that she had never been unfaithful to the king. On the morning of Friday, 19th of May, Anne was taken to a scaffold on the north side of the White Tower. She wore a red petticoat under a loose dark grey gown trimmed in fur. Accompanied by 2 female attendants, Anne made her final walk from the Queen's house to the scaffold. Anne climbed the scaffold and made a short speech to the crowd. I'm going to read what she said, if I can, because they speak so differently back then. So she said, "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die. For according to the law, and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that, whereof I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never. And to me he was ever a good and gentle and sovereign Lord. And if any person will meddle of my cause, I require them to judge the best. And thus I take my leave of the world and of you all, and I heartily desire you to all pray for me. O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul." Jeez. She gracefully addressed the people from the scaffold with a voice somewhat overcome by weakness, but which gathered strength as she went on. That's sad. So she begged her hearers to forgive her and asked for their prayers. It was needless, she said, to relate why she was there, but she prayed the judge of all the world to have compassion on those who had condemned her, and she begged them to pray for the king, in who she had always found great kindness, fear of God, and love of his subjects. But if he was so kind, then he wouldn't be chopping your head off. I'm just saying. So the spectators could not refrain from just crying. People were crying. It is thought that Anne avoided criticizing Henry to save Elizabeth, her daughter, and her family from further consequences, but even under such extreme pressure, Anne did not confess guilt, and indeed subtly implied her innocence. She's very well spoken. I don't think I did it justice at all, but I tried, okay? I suck at bloody words. Anne lifted off her headdress. She tucked her hair. After a brief farewell to her weeping ladies and a request for prayers, she knelt down, and one of her ladies tied a blindfold over her eyes. She knelt upright in the French style of beheading. Her final prayer consisted of her repeating continually. So she said, "Jesus, receive my soul. O Lord God, have pity on my soul." And she just kept saying that. The execution consisted of a single stroke. It was witnessed by Thomas Cromwell, Charles Brandon, 1st Duke of Suffolk, the King's illegitimate son, oh my god, Henry Fitzroy, the Lord Mayor of London, as well as aldermen, sheriffs, and representatives of the various craft guides. Most of the King's Council were also present. Cranmer, who was at Lambeth Palace, was reported to have broken down in tears. So he said, this is what Cranmer said, "She who has been the Queen of England on earth will today become a queen in heaven." When the charges were first brought against Anne, Cranmer had expressed his astonishment to Henry and his belief that she was innocent. Because she was. I believe she was innocent. Henry was just trying to get out of a marriage so that he could marry Jane Seymour. So it's like, yeah. Cranmer felt vulnerable because of his closeness to the Queen. On the night before the execution, he declared Henry's marriage to Anne to have been void, like Catherine's before her. So it would have been such a hard job. He had no serious, there were no serious attempts to save Anne's life, although some sources record that he had prepared her for death by hearing her last private confession of sins, in which she had stated her innocence before God. So she just kept on saying like she didn't do it. And I believe that. On the day of her death, a Scottish friend found Cranmer weeping uncontrollably in his London gardens, saying that he was sure that Anne had now gone to heaven. She was then buried in an unmarked grave in the chapel of St. Peter. Her skeleton was identified during renovations of the chapel in 1876 in the reign of Queen Victoria, and Anne's grave is now identified on the marble floor. Upon this, in 1876, no abnormalities were discovered, because people said that like she had 6 fingers or something. She didn't. Her frame was described as delicate, approximately 5 feet 3 inches. Her hand and feet bones indicated delicate and well-shaped hands and feet with tapering fingers and a narrow foot. Anne Boleyn was described as intelligent and gifted in musical arts. She was also strong-willed and proud, and often she quarreled with her husband Henry. As we do, right? We all argue with our husbands, but yeah, he was a king, and he was one heck of a king. My goodness, go watch my video about Henry. She was said to be religious yet aggressive, calculating yet emotional, with the light touch of the courtier yet the strong grip of the politicians. What does come to us across the centuries is the impression of a person who is strangely appealing to the early 21st century, a woman in her own right, taken on her own terms in a man's world, a woman who mobilized her education, her style, and her presence to outweigh the disadvantages of her sex. No contemporary portraits of Anne Boleyn survive, so they're all just like guesstimates. Following the coronation of her daughter as queen, Anne was made a heroine of the English Reformation. Over the centuries, Anne has inspired or been mentioned in numerous artistic and cultural works. As a result, she has remained in popular memory and has been called the most influential and important queen consort England has ever had. Sorry, Camilla. Oh dear. Anne's appearance has been much discussed by historians, as all of her portraits were destroyed following an order by Henry VIII. So he wanted to just erase her from history, which is shit, man, because remember they had a child together. Like the daughter would have wanted to keep her mum's pictures. So many surviving depictions of her may be copies of a lost original that apparently existed as late as 1773. The other possible portrait of Anne was a secret locket ring that her daughter Elizabeth I possessed, and it was taken from one of her fingers at her death in 1603. Hans Holbein originally painted Anne's portrait and also sketched her during her lifetime. There are 2 surviving sketches that have been identified to be Anne by historians and people who knew her back in the day. Most scholars believe that Anne cannot be one of the 2, as the portrayals do not look similar enough to each other, while other people think that they do show the same woman, but in one sketch she is pregnant, while in the other she's not. So you know when you get pregnant you get puffy and we get chunkier, and then yeah, anyway. It is said that Anne Boleyn was considered brilliant, charming, driven, elegant, forthright and graceful, with a keen wit and lively, opinionated and passionate personality. Anne was depicted as sweet and cheerful in her youth, and she enjoyed playing cards and dice games. She enjoyed drinking wine, she liked French cuisine, she liked to flirt, she liked gambling, gossiping and good jokes. She was fond of archery, hunting and the occasional game of bowls. A number of people have claimed to have seen Anne's ghost. So this is another part. I don't even know why I put this in, but people say that they've seen her ghost at Hever Castle and the Tower of London, but I'm not sure if I believe in that stuff. So yeah, if you want to read about it, go have a look. Yeah, so that is the story for today about Anne Boleyn. If you guys have any suggestions for some history stories you'd like me to tell, please let me know. Pop it in the comments section. I love to research, so yeah. I highly suggest watching my Henry VIII video because it tells you more about him. He's a jerk. Just saying. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I hope you guys have a wonderful morning, day, night, whatever it is where you are. Please go check out my other channel. It's called Crime, Mystery and Mayhem. I have subscribed to that channel from this channel, so you can find it in my subscribey channel thingies. Oh my god, my words have stopped just after doing all that. I'm tired now and I have to go pick up my kids. I'm gonna go. Have a wonderful day. Ka kite. Bye.